Hi everyone, today we are going to show you how to handle housing as a travel nurse. Jane Cook and Ashley Graham from Travel Nurse Across America are going to lead this discussion. Ashley has almost 18 years in the industry. She is passionate about providing top-notch service and support to travelers. Ashley leads two teams, one of which is responsible for assisting travelers with housing arrangements, offering housing solutions and resources that fit the unique needs of each traveler is a priority. She and her team strive to provide relevant services with a focus on education, dynamic housing solutions, affordability, and safety, which is very important in housing, as some of you probably already know. Housing is another topic that is very popular in our community. We have a whole section dedicated to it on the gypsynurse.com. You can search for safe and reliable housing from Furnish Finder on there, or check out some housing tips in our article section. It's very important to know the ins and out of housing, especially when you're first getting started. And it's always good to know even down the road. If you've already been doing this a little while, you can always learn something new. So this is going to be a very helpful session for everyone. Feel free to ask questions in the comments. They're going to do their best to answer them all. So I'm now going to pass this on to Steve, our Gypsy Nurse CEO.
Thank you, Rachel, and thank you, Ashley and Jean, for doing another session with us. This is great. And next to compensation, I would say that housing is probably one of the more popular topics on our Facebook network group. So we appreciate your expertise, and I know you have some things to walk us through. And as per usual, I would encourage all of the attendees to ask questions. We have a variety of ways that you can ask questions, and we will provide those to you, Jean and Ashley, during the presentation. So thank you again for doing this session, and take it away.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks again, as we always do, and it's because it's so important. We want to acknowledge and appreciate all the work that the Gypsy Nurse does with the nurses, and for allowing us to be part of their mission to help all of you travelers out there. Traveler housing, it is a thing. It is not the same as permanent housing. It's different. And so what we want to try to cover for you today is the things that are different, the things that you can do to make it a smooth experience. So we've named this Paving the Way to a Smooth Experience. And we're going to start today with the things to consider before you even begin. It is important to get that brain in the right place and think about what you want, what you don't want, etc. And Ashley, with her many years of experience in helping nurses with this, is going to get us started with location. Ashley?
Awesome. Thanks, Jean. So location is really the key foundational component of your search. So one of the things I recommend is for you to really begin the search by getting to know the area that you're going to be traveling to. Do a little bit of research. Go to the, to some of the local city websites and just learn about what type of community it is, what are some of the things that you might expect to be able to do. Just familiarize yourself with the location first and foremost. That's going to help you feel more at ease and prepared when you arrive on location. And you may actually end up learning a few little helpful details that might help you might act as a guide to help you begin your search. And then when you start thinking about transportation, the big question really is, do you take your car? Do you not take your car? And that's really a personal preference, but you also need to really consider the area that you're going to. Major metropolitan areas like San Francisco or Seattle are typically going to have a really great public transportation platform for you to utilize. And if that's something you're open to doing, then maybe you leave your car at home. But then when you're considering the more rural locations, the odds that they're going to have good transportation in place are usually slim to none. So you want to make sure you're taking that into consideration. But even in the major metropolitan areas, sometimes it might be a good consideration for you to bring your car anyway, because then it allows you to kind of determine, maybe you want to drive a little bit farther so that you can find more affordable housing. We all know major metropolitan areas are traditionally going to be more expensive. So when you have the flexibility to expand that search, it's going to make the pool of housing options obviously a lot larger. It's going to make that list that you have to choose from a little bit better. So all things to take into consideration as it relates to bringing the car or not bringing the car. But then come the assignment rules. And a lot of assignments traditionally are going to have some specific rules. Sometimes you may be required to take call, and that's probably the most common rule that we run into. And that changes your decisioning around transportation a little bit. For instance, if your on-call requirements are 30 minutes, maybe you have to find something that's within 20 minutes. And I always recommend that you give yourself a buffer there, because you have to allow for traffic conditions and other variables that may impact your ability to get to the facility quickly. But that also then brings that search list of potential housing options, it makes it a little bit smaller. So those are just all things to consider. And the other thing that I want to recommend around the assignment rules is to kind of figure out what your minimum and your max commute time is. That's going to help really help you kind of determine what you're going to be okay with and what you're not going to be okay with. And I'm going to now hand this back off, I believe, to Jean, and she's going to talk about budget.
Budget. It's a thing. Whether you're on stipends or per diems or not, you need to think about how much you want to spend, what you're going to need to spend, what does that budget part of it really looks like. This is a big piece after you've figured out where you need to be. This is a big piece of your thinking before you begin your housing search. There are needs versus wants. Some of the stuff, for example, what I actually just said of, do you have to be within 30 minutes of a hospital? That's a need. Does it have 2 Olympic-sized swimming pools? Might be a want. So we recommend that you write down, and maybe even the order of importance to you, your needs and wants. It's unlikely that you are going to find one place that has everything on that needs and wants list. So your ability to have thought about it ahead of time, what do you really need versus what do you just want, or what would be the nice to haves, think about that ahead. Pricing and availability is important. Ashley's going to talk later about long-term versus short-term is not the same. There are different parts of the country that are more expensive than others. There are parts of cities that are more expensive than others. There are 2 bedrooms are more expensive than ones. What is the availability? You may be going during a particularly busy time of year. So there's a lot to the price and the availability. So you're going to have to think about those factors. Safety and cleanliness. You are going, it's likely, highly likely that you're going to a place you've never been before. That's part of the spirit of the traveler adventurer, is that you may be going somewhere you've never been before. What is safe? What parts of town are safe? What areas are safe? We take it very, very to heart and very personally that we don't want to put one of our employee nurses in a place that isn't safe. So think about safety concerns as you consider your needs and wants and price and availability. There are places online where you can look at the local police records of different locations to see if it seems to be a more high traffic crime area or less. Do you want to be close to shopping? Do you want to be, all those sorts of things are part of safety and transportation and location. And now you've started to think about, oh, I've got these needs of, I have to be close to the facility. Maybe you must have 2 bedrooms because you're traveling with someone. You've got the wants of the two Olympic-sized pools or a large gym in the apartment complex or whatever the wants are. You may start to be thinking about, this is a lot of moving parts. And it is a lot of moving parts. So one of the things we talk a lot about is flexibility. Flexibility is going to be key. You might not get all your wants, so you're going to have to be flexible. And here's, and remember that when you're looking, remember that when you're talking to anybody that's helping you look, flexibility will be key in you finding the place you want. You might not find the 2 Olympic-sized swimming pools, but you might find one. And guess what? I get, unless you've got some kids that you want them over at the other pool while you're one is enough. You're only going to use one swimming pool at a time. Maybe that's okay. So really think about the flexibility, the balance of pricing and availability, and make that needs and wants list. It's really easier to think about those things before you start looking versus when you're looking. If you happen to be lucky enough to be going to a location with a lot of choices, it can be like buying a car or buying a house. You get to the point where you can't remember which one had what, right? And you're going to be doing this not even walking in, looking at them in person. You're going to be doing it online from a distance. So knowing what you need, what you want, and what kind of flexibility you have ahead of time is going to prepare you for a search that's going to pave your way to that smoother housing search. We know that travelers are big pet lovers. Ashley and I are big pet lovers. I locked mine upstairs so that they couldn't interrupt us during the session. So we're going to let Ashley, with her years of experience as a pet owner and helping travelers who are pet owners, talk to us about how to travel with pets.
Thanks, Jean. Pets are just such a huge component of the travel experience. And I would say that probably the majority of our travelers take pets with them. But taking pets with you also presents certain challenges. So when you're preparing for your search, those are going to be things you're going to want to take into consideration. So just some tips on how to prepare as it relates to your pets. You need to always mentally prepare yourself to pay something for that pet. It can be a mixture of a lot of different things. You may see a refundable pet deposit. You may see a non-refundable pet fee. And some properties, vendors, private owners may even charge monthly pet rent. So just know that you may see all three of those. You may see a mixture of maybe one or two of them, or maybe just one, but just always be prepared. One of the questions I get a lot is, well, if it's only for 3 months, why am I having to do that? Well, the reality is that the liability or the opportunity for damage, and we all know that's a reality, is the same whether you're in the apartment for 3 months or you're in the apartment for 12. It's the same. So that's one of the reasons why you're going to see that. The other thing I want to talk about really quickly is just aggressive breeds. Now, we all know and we all think that our dogs and our cats are the sweetest, most loving creatures on the planet. But pets landing on the aggressive breeds list is a real thing. And obviously it's more common with dogs. In fact, I would like to see an area that actually puts a cat on an aggressive breed list. But it's more specific to the dogs, and it's more specific to the larger breeds. So make sure when you're preparing that you do a little bit of homework to figure out, maybe is your pet going to be considered an aggressive breed? And just, make sure that you are looking at that before you make that firm decision to take that pet with you, because depending on the area that you choose, you may find that that area is not going to be as pet friendly, particularly as it relates to those larger breed dogs. So it's just something to take into consideration. One of the big things that I cannot stress enough is keep all of your vaccination records handy. Don't pack them away in a box or in a tub that you've got packed in your trunk that's going to be incredibly inconvenient to get to. Put them with the other items that you commonly carry with you that you need easy access to, because you just never know when you're going to be asked to present that information. Some properties are going to ask for it in advance. Some properties may ask for it once you get there. So you just need to make sure they're handy so that it's not a big inconvenience. And then the last thing I want to touch on as it relates to pets is service pets. It is not uncommon in this day and age for us to see travelers that have either themselves or a significant other that are bringing a service pet with them. So in addition to all the things you have to take into consideration, in addition to those vaccination records, make sure you have all of your documentation handy as it relates to that animal being a service pet, because you're going to have to prove that to the apartment complex, private owner, or the vendor that you're renting from. And I think that covers it. So Steve, do we have any questions yet before we move on to the next set of topics?
One of the questions that came up is relative to bringing a pet, as you had mentioned, Ashley, many travelers are now bringing their pets with them. In terms of the ease of acquiring housing or the ease of getting into a housing situation that's what a traveler wants, if the traveler has the ability to leave the pet with a family member, with somebody they can trust to care for that pet, would you advise that perhaps they leave the pet, and that will give them more options when it comes to housing? What's your advice there?
Ooh, that's a good one, Steve. So that one kind of tugs at my heartstrings, because I know if it were me personally, I would never want to leave my my pets at home. But what I'm going to say is that is a personal decision. If you have the option to do it, is it going to open up a lot more options and give you a level of flexibility? 100%. My housing specialist will tell you all day long that it's way easier, and you're going to have a lot more options to choose from if you can make other accommodations for your pet. So that's a really good question. But can it be achieved? Yes. Is it going to be more challenging? 100%.
Are there, and a follow-on to that, are there particular regions or cities that you might comment on that are perhaps a little bit more pet-friendly than other regions? I mean, would the New England area, as an example, be a little bit more accommodating, you found, to bring pets than perhaps the Midwest or something? I'm just throwing out examples, but do you have any feedback on that?
Yeah, that's actually a really great question. So California is one of those weird areas. They are huge dog lovers, but we see a lot of restrictions on cats. Cats are not allowed for whatever reason. I will tell you that it's kind of an offshoot of this. The smaller dogs traditionally are a lot easier to house than the larger breeds are. They present a certain challenge, particularly if we have weight limit restrictions. I have heard from travelers, and as well as my housing specialist, that the Seattle area, that whole area up there, Seattle, Auburn, Puyallup, all those little locations in Washington, they are extremely dog friendly. So you see a lot of opportunities to take your pets to little outdoor, restaurants and things like that. So there are some locations where it is really pet friendly. My advice is, if your agency has a housing department, ask some questions. They're going to be very knowledgeable, and they're probably going to be able to help you determine if the areas you're considering are a good fit. And that's something you can typically do in advance, depending on the agency. 100%. Really great question, Steve. Thanks.
Good information. And as I said, it comes up. Housing is a very popular topic within our network group, and traveling with pets is a huge topic within that. So great information.
It is. Yeah, you're very welcome.
Yeah, one thing I would add on the pet thing is a question we get sometimes, I think, Ashley, is, it's a facility that a location, apartment complex, etc., landlord that doesn't allow pets, or that only allows small pets. Will you ask them for an exception? I would tell you not to waste your time. For the most part, those landlords and apartment complexes have set those rules for reasons, and it's highly unlikely that you're going to get a waiver on that. So your best bet probably is to spend your time productively looking at the people who are the locations that are going to fit your needs, including your pet. We don't have to like it as pet owners that some apartment complexes don't allow pets or don't like the large pets. We don't have to like it. We don't have to agree with it, but it's their building, and it's their right to do that, to take the risk of the pet or not. And I can guarantee you every landlord has some sort of a pet horror story, not your pet, but somebody else's, right? That's done something that they had to deal with. So asking for a waiver probably isn't worth your time, because it's unlikely. The summary of all this is get started early, right, Ashley? There's a reason we made this a big blue shiny bullet on this page. Don't wait till the last couple of weeks. You just won't be as likely to find what you want if you wait too long to get started.
Yes, and I can tell you from experience that it can alter your overall experience if you wait until the week before you're going to start. Give yourself enough time so that you can accomplish what you need to accomplish. Don't wait. Don't wait.
You could end up with a place you don't like.
Yep.
If you have to spend that last week or two spending this huge chunk of time trying to even find a place, you might not get all your modules done. You might not get your license work done, and you could arrive to start this brand new experience stressed out.
100%.
Arrive for that brand new experience ready to roll.
100%. Well said.
This is the way to do that, by starting early.
Well said, Jean.
So our next area is myth versus reality. There are some myths and there's some realities in traveler housing. It is different, right, than getting an apartment for a year at a time. Ashley already mentioned the 3-month thing. So Ashley's going to walk us through some of these. And the first one is that topic of what's the difference between an apartment for a year or an apartment for 3 months, and why does it matter? So Ashley, let's educate folks on that one.
Definitely. So this is a recurring topic, as Jean mentioned. It can be kind of deceiving when you begin that search. Rental rates, almost always, when you go out to some of the websites and you begin that search and you start looking at different places, those rates are almost always going to be 12-month rates that are posted. And so what we see happen sometimes is people go into it with a certain expectation because they've seen these rates online, and then they really start digging in and starting the process and figuring out that that rate is much higher. So always call. If you find a place you really like, pick up the phone and call the property, or send an email if they have a way to contact them and just ask about the short-term rates. Now, that's not to say that sometimes that rate isn't going to be accurate, but I will tell you probably 9 times out of 10, they're going to post that 12-month rate because that's traditionally what most people, when they're looking for an apartment, are looking for is a longer-term lease. Not the case with travelers, not the case. You're going to typically see probably a 20 to 25% rate increase when you go from a 12-month lease to a 3-month lease, and that's pretty much an industry standard. And there is a little bit of flex in there. Sometimes you may see that rate increase higher. Sometimes you may see it a little bit lower. But as a general rule, that's what you're going to see. So if you're looking at kind of building a budget, that's actually a really good way to kind of gauge what your high point and your low point are going to be, is to use that 20 to 25% rule. Rates are very, very, very fluid too. So you might want to consider being really flexible on your move-in and your move-out dates. So for instance, let's say you've got a start date in November, and you found a property you really like, and you call them, and they give you a price. You might ask them, if you move in, maybe say towards the end of October, how that impacts that rental rate. You may end up paying for a few extra days, but the overall savings can traditionally be pretty big depending on. A lot of apartment complexes determine what their rates are going to be based on their occupancy. So if they have a bunch of people that are vacating in November, odds are that that rental rate is going to be much higher. So if you just end up adjusting either that move-in or that move-out date by just a little bit, it could have a significant impact to what you end up paying on a monthly basis. The other thing that I really like to recommend is not to be afraid to negotiate, especially as it applies to private owners and more non-traditional vendors, because frequently you get an opportunity to ask them if they're going to be a little bit more flexible. One of the things I've seen travelers do is maybe consider asking if they will give a price break if they pay all 3 months up front. Now, there's some risk associated with that, so I'm saying that, but there are ways for you to negotiate better rates for yourself, particularly as it applies to private owners and vendors like that. The other thing to think about is just making sure that you are keeping track, kind of like Jean was talking about, how the whole experience can be very overwhelming. So as you start making those phone calls and you kind of really dig into what those rates look like, make sure you're keeping a list. Maybe you create like a little worksheet and you just keep track of those rates just to make sure, because those rates can change very quickly.
This is one of those moments that ties into the budget I was talking about on the previous screen, the needs, the wants, the long-term versus short-term, the price and availability, right? So you've got per diems, or not. Most are doing per diems, as we know. And you get that per diem number, and it can at first look like, oh, well, I'm gonna find something for a whole lot less than that. I'll be fine. And you think you're gonna make money on your per diems. And you might make some money on your per diems, but those per diems are set at a rate that we think it's likely that you're going to need for the reimbursement for your duplicative living expenses. It's not set at some great big number for you to make a bunch of money off of. So this gets into that myth versus reality. You'll see discussions out in the cyber world of, I'm only going to spend half of my per diem. You're not likely to find something you're going to feel safe and comfortable in for half of your per diem amount, considering that you're going to be paying a fee that's a short-term fee. And you're going to have, and like at home, you got your own furniture. You're paying for furniture, right? So just one of those long-term versus short-term realities when you think about the money side.
And Jean, I love that, because then it reminded me of something. One of the things I usually tell travelers when I'm chatting with them and they're working with maybe a budget that isn't ideal for the market that they're going to, take whatever that monthly budget is you've established for yourself, divide that by 30 days and determine what that daily rate's going to look like. And then think about, what kind of hotel can I get for this daily rate? And that's typically going to give you a little bit of insight into what the quality may be if you are looking for an apartment in that similar range. If you're only giving yourself $30 a day, sometimes, depending on where you're going, that could really negatively impact the outcome of your search. So just be very realistic as it relates to that. Love that, Jean. That was perfect.
Next topic, the market you're in. We've talked some about that. What other parts of that have we not already hit on, Ashley?
Well, so COVID and the pandemic.
COVID's a thing.
COVID's a thing. And like many things in our current world, it has impacted the rental market. The rental market has become very restrictive and super competitive. Super competitive. My advice to travelers is, if you find something you really like and it fits the majority of your requirements, your needs versus wants, don't hesitate. Figure out what it's going to take to hold that unit, to take it off the market so it's yours. Don't wait, because if you wait, one of two things is going to happen. Either one, you're going to call back, and I'm talking the very next day. We have actually seen apartments where we've priced it at 10 o'clock in the morning, and we go back at, like, say 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the unit's gone. It's gone. And then the other negative to waiting is, if it's not gone, you may see that rate go up. So it's very, very, very restrictive, very competitive, and very fluid. Speed is the name of the game here. I cannot stress to you how important it is. Whether you're working with a housing specialist at an agency or you're navigating this on your own, make sure you're making very quick decisions. And always, always, always have a backup plan. My recommendation, if you've got a list of properties you work from and you've kind of narrowed it down, take your top 3. Start with the first one, knowing that you've got a couple of other options that you're happy with, so that when that one option that you really love doesn't work out, you've got backup plans, and you've got a backup plan that you're comfortable with. Because again, hanging your hat on that one option could severely negatively impact your experience and put more added stress that you just don't need.
Don't apply to one college, right?
Exactly.
Thanks, Ashley, for that info. And
yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, think about those choices that Ashley just gave us. And again, back to your budget, right? We said start early, and then Ashley just said speed's the name of the game. And that might seem like those are counterintuitive, but what we're saying is, you might not find the thing that fits you for a while, but when you do, you'd better decide. One of the reasons you might not find it for a while is because the market is tight and it may not be open, and then it may all of a sudden come open. So there is balance between the start early and when you do find it, you might not want to waste time thinking about it. It could be gone. Right?
Yeah.
Next topic. You alluded to hotels, Ashley. Hotels are a real option. Why?
Hotels can be your friend. That's I'm just going to say it. I think people are frequently very hesitant to consider hotels, and there's a couple of different ways that you can give hotels the consideration that I feel like it deserves. They offer a level of flexibility that you just don't get with traditional housing. So if something happens, or you find something else that's less expensive, more cost effective, more in line with what you wanted, once you get there, with a hotel, you've got a little bit of flexibility. Obviously, you have to take into account rates, like if you're getting a weekly rate or you're getting a monthly rate, but it just gives you a level of flexibility so that you can maybe do a hotel for a few weeks and then maybe do something else. The other thing I recommend is if you're going to an area that you've never been before and you're really nervous about making a housing decision from far away, maybe consider booking a hotel for 2 or 3 weeks. Gives yourself a little bit of flexibility. You can get there, get some boots on the ground, talk to people at the hospital that you're interacting with. You just never know who's going to have a room for rent or a little mother-in-law's cottage in their backyard. And it also gives you that opportunity to physically go and look at the options. We highly recommend that, particularly if you're wanting to try to successfully house yourself. Sometimes waiting until you get there is the name of the game, particularly when you're talking about the more rural areas, the more off the beaten path areas where you just really don't know what you're going to get. I'm also a really big fan of considering long-term hotels. TNAA partners with a couple of different hotel platforms for that exact reason, and there's some cost savings there. Now, with most long-term hotels, you're going to get an economy option. So just as long as your expectations are where they should be for that type of option, it could potentially be a really good fit. You see, the longer the reservation, the deeper the discount traditionally. We use Extended Stay America a lot, and I usually get a couple of eyebrows when I mention that, because we acknowledge and we know that not all long-term hotels, including Extended Stay America, are going to be created equal. So it's also important for you to apply a similar logic if you're considering a long-term hotel as you do when you are looking at apartments. Do your research, look at the area, read the reviews on TripAdvisor. Make sure that you're focusing on the things that are important to you when you're considering it. But just as long as you're thinking about it and you're doing your research, we see tons of successes with this, and people legitimately save money. And what's not to love about not having to set your utilities up and have your cable and your internet provided? And some of the hotels do, guest events and different things. So there's a lot of definite pluses to doing something like that. And then the last recommendation I'm going to make is, if you consider doing a hotel, check with your agency, because a lot of the agencies are going to have partner hotels that they work with where you can get a discount. So make sure you're asking about those things.
Do we, Ashley and Jean, might be time for a couple of questions. Are you guys ready for that?
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, just a comment here coming from Christina along the lines of hotels. Christina says, the last 2 assignments I've stayed at hotels, and she says the benefits were they were very flexible and there were lots of amenities. So I think
Yes.
kind of underscores your point, Ashley.
Yes, thank you, Christina.
Flexibility is important, and hotels have a whole big piece of flexibility. Yeah,
absolutely.
Another question that comes in is, what's the first thing you do when your housing falls through? And you guys might cover this in a minute. So if you want to wait till a future slide, that's fine. But what do you do when your housing falls through? It's an instant panic attack when it does. What's a good game plan to keep calm and find a new solution?
Yes, I can answer that now. It's going to depend on what kind of resources you have available, and we're going to talk about resources here in a minute. But one of the biggest things is don't panic. give yourself some breathing room. Maybe press pause and find a hotel that is going to work for you temporarily, and just keep telling yourself that it's temporary. Give yourself some breathing room. It kind of goes back to me recommending that once you get to an area, maybe you book a hotel so you've got that buffer. That is almost my most immediate recommendation. Is you can't control what's just happened. So plan to give yourself a buffer so that you can figure it out. And don't just book a night or two, maybe book a week. And that gives you that opportunity to press pause, figure out what you need to do, and just give you a little bit of breathing room. Because you're right. When you have booked something, you were banking on it, you felt like all your pieces were in place, and then you get 75% to your location just to find out something has happened and you're not going to be able to move in on time, or you're not going to be able to move in at all. The biggest thing is to come up with a game plan. And I would almost always recommend that you start with a hotel, because you still have to get there and you want to make sure you're giving yourself a little bit of bandwidth to regroup and figure out where you need to go from there. And make sure if you're keeping that list and you've got your top 3 choices, make sure you maybe take your list with you, because then you have a starting point. But here's what I'm going to say. You're not going to be able to house yourself on a dime overnight. So make sure you're giving yourself some breathing room so you can accomplish what you need to.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to say. When you've got your housing locked down for this assignment, don't throw away those notes. If something happens, you've got those notes to go back on. And if it falls through 2 or 3 weeks before your assignment, you've got a chance to call those and see if they might still have something for you. If it's a day or 2 or 3 before, I think Ashley's hit the nail on the head that you're at the moment of a hotel, and those can be great to give you that breathing room so that you can remain calm, start your assignment, and then find something.
What about, Ashley, any advice for those that are looking at renting a room in a house? We see that a lot within the Gypsy Nurse Facebook housing group, where people will be looking for, or landlords will be advertising a room within a house. To me, that seems like close quarters. Usually you want a separate area or something, but I understand, depending on the availability of inventory and financial concerns, sometimes people might be interested in doing that. What are some of the things that you might want to give advice on in those scenarios?
Love that question. So renting a room is a very personal choice. You have to be really comfortable with doing something like that. And I'm going to tell you that over the years, I've seen successes, but I've also seen people be put in really bad situations. So my recommendation is to do your homework. If you're considering renting a room, make sure you're talking with the owner and you're getting to know them, and make sure that they're very forthcoming with answering any questions and smoothing over any concerns. And the reality is there's only so much you can really learn from afar. So maybe you put that hotel knowledge to work, and maybe you book a hotel for a few days. You make arrangements to meet with that person one-on-one. We actually had a situation recently where we had a traveler that was doing a room for rent. She chose to do the hotel. She went and met the owner and then immediately decided it was not a good fit. So wiggle room. So maybe ask, hey, can I do like a 1 week trial run to make sure this is a good fit for me? Don't be afraid to ask for what it is you really need, because it is a very personal choice, and it's either going to go really great or it's not going to be so great. So
and
you
I
just
can
have
imagine
to.
when it's not so great, it's really not so great.
Yes, I mean,
most of the time they're great.
They are.
COVID's added an impact too.
It has.
Not every homeowner is willing to have a health professional in their home, and before we get mad at them for that, we don't know, but what they have an immune deficient. They may have an important reason for it, but just know that's another one of those rental market issues where COVID has been an impact. So when Ashley says make sure they can answer every question, make sure they know exactly who you are too, so that you don't get there and have one of those cancel moments that
That's a great point.
question.
Yeah, that's a great point because I know our community has mentioned that a number of times in our discussion group about, particularly earlier on in the pandemic. I haven't seen it as much lately, but certainly the first 2 or 3 months of the pandemic, there were an awful lot of situations where, unfortunately, nurses were showing up at, a home or what have you, and once the landlord found out, their homeowner found out that they were a nurse, they were saying, "I'm sorry, but I can't have you stay here because I'm immune compromised or family members are," just generally feeling uncomfortable. And that made for I think, for some really tough situations for the travel nurses.
It did.
Yep.
So I think we're adding full disclosure. It has to go both ways, to Jean's point. So make sure you're being as forthcoming with your information and your situation as you're asking of them. Airbnb actually did kind of an initiative during when COVID first started, where they gave the owners the option to either opt in or opt out. And I think that was a really positive thing that they did. And it actually helped a lot of our travelers navigate that, because they knew when they went to Airbnb that particular vendor was okay, knew that they were a healthcare professional.
Now you could opt into I forget what they call it, but you could opt into medical professional.
It was first responders. Yeah, it was a first responders program, which was smart.
Couple of other comments here. Christina, similar to your point earlier, Ashley and Jean. Christina says, staying in a hotel for a week or two at the beginning of an assignment allows you to see the rooms or the apartment, because sometimes scammers are prevalent online, or they're there anyway. So it helps you kind of get that footing before you move forward. Shelley asks, and this is maybe a little bit further down the road in our discussion here, but Shelley asks, do traveling medical staff, can they rent a private RV site? So I don't know if that necessarily comes under the aspect of housing, or at least the housing topics that we are discussing, but any comments on RVs or RV sites?
If you have an RV, you absolutely can rent an RV site and take your RV.
Absolutely. And we see a lot of travelers that do that. There's a lot of moving pieces to finding an RV site. So, and the other thing, if you are going to an area that typically has a very hard winter, a lot of the RV parks, they winterize and they close for the year. So that's another thing to consider. If you're an RV person and you're going to go to, you're going to head up the East Coast where they have a lot of snow and they have really hard winters. You probably need to make sure that the RV parks are even open, because a lot of them winterize and they shut down for the season.
And RV parks aren't generally in downtown areas. So if you're doing a metropolitan downtown assignment, you might not find one within the on-call distance that we talked about on earlier in the discussion. You might not be able to find within 20 minutes. So is it great to not have to unpack and repack and have your own space that you can do whatever with? Absolutely. But thanks for asking that, so we could point out some of the pros and cons.
Definitely.
The last comment here, Leah says, I've had both good and bad experiences with renting rooms, but more good than bad. And I made some good friends doing this. So that's another way to look at renting a room.
Yep, absolutely.
Seasonal lead in, Ashley, to our next topic. Ashley was just talking about some RV parks winterize. There are other seasonal aspects to finding housing as well. Oh, and I caught her right when she was getting a drink of water.
Sorry. Yeah, seasonal is one of those things that you also have to take into consideration. We talked about the RV park aspect of it, but most facilities are going to look for travelers when their census is up. And in areas where they have a low season and a high season, the census is going to go up during high season. And the downside to that is that the rental rates aren't going to be as flexible and aren't going to be as cost effective. So when you are navigating through that search, you definitely want to think about, is the assignment location that I'm going to, is it a seasonal area? Is it going to be one of those areas where I'm going to see higher rates than other times of the year? It's just one of those things you really want to make sure that you're thinking through. And if you're just not really sure, that kind of goes back to doing the research and getting to know the area before you really start the search. But seasonal is definitely something you have to take into consideration because it's a real thing. If you're going to an area along the coast and it's one of those areas where tourists like to go, people like to vacation, or you're going to one of those locations where people are flocking to right now because they get the opportunity to get out of the house and it's more secluded and you can hike and you can, do all of those things out in nature. You're also going to see some seasonal influxes in those areas as well. So the seasonality of locations plays a big part in where that price point is going to end up landing as far as your housing goes. And then I think we're going to move on, and I think Jean's going to talk about a few things, I believe.
Yeah, so we talked earlier about get started early, needs versus wants, and all those things. Part of what ties into that, after you've heard many of our topics and how to make it be smooth, is don't assume. You can't assume it's easy. It is not as easy as getting a 1 year something. The landlords who are willing to rent short term are fewer. They've made a business decision that they don't want to do short term, what they call flips. They don't want to totally clean and maybe recarpet every 3 months or whatever those deals are. So don't assume that it's going to be easy, and don't assume that you will get that rate again. Different places across the country have very different profiles. We've talked about it. Season, metropolitan, rural. Are they apartment complex poor? Or are they apartment complex rich? All of those things drive to a rate. And the rate you had in Dallas may not look anything like Chicago, even though those cities are somewhat the same size. So you really can't assume that what you've experienced in one geography is going to be the same as another. And if you happen to go to a location in their low season and you go back in the high season, your rate could be different even if you return to an area from the last time you were there, if it's a different season or it's been a couple of years or whatever. So we would ask that you keep that open mind, part of the flexibility that we talked about, and don't make a bunch of assumptions about how easy it's going to be or what it's going to be like. It's sort of a little bit of the adventure every time you take a new assignment, that the housing is going to be a little bit different. So at the risk of repeating ourselves, we said start early. Don't forget to get started early and help you navigate the realities and get past some of the myths. So you might be feeling a theme, but get started early is we think some of the best advice we could get. So we're going to repeat it. Next area we wanted to go into for you all is resources. We've mentioned some of those along the way, but use the resources you have. Read the reviews. Do Google Maps and see if it looks like this apartment complex backs up to a manufacturing district or an airport. Look at the Google Maps to see what is the distance between the assignment hospital or facility you're going to and the area of town you're looking at. So read reviews, look at the maps. Many agencies have resources, everything from a website page you can look at to people you can call and are assigned to help you. Use the agency resources. That's back to part of don't think it's going to be easy and don't wait till the end because you might be wrong. Use whatever agency resources you have. And we say ask, ask, ask. Ask is research as well. So research, ask, 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 ask. Ask other travelers. Ask on Gypsy Nurse. Use Gypsy Nurse as a resource, their housing page. Say, hey, anybody stayed in this area? Anybody tried this apartment complex? With as many travelers as there are out there on Gypsy Nurse and other sites, you're liable to find somebody who can give you a few tidbits for that area or maybe even the exact place you're looking. So I guess part of what I would say is don't be shy and do your homework and please get started early. It's important. Please get started early.
It is.
That's what we had for you today. Ashley, do you have any more comments on this? And Steve, maybe you've got some more questions.
No, Jean, I think you did a really good wrap up there as it relates to the resources. I cannot stress to you guys enough that asking for help is a good thing. When you are trying to make these experiences very smooth, then I can't stress how important it is to do your homework. The Google Map thing, I don't know how many of you guys are familiar with Google Maps, but Jean was talking about making sure you're estimating your commute. You can actually narrow that commute down to the actual day you're starting your assignment, as well as when you need to get to the hospital. So you can narrow it down and it becomes very, very, very specific to the unique situation that you are going to be in as it relates to that. The other way that you can use Google Maps is you can use Street View, and we are big fans of Street View in the housing department at TNAA. We will literally drive around, take the little person and drag them down onto the map, and we're going to drive around the area. It gives you some opportunity and some insight into what the area looks like. You know, the last thing you want to do is get there and then realize your apartment backs right up to a light rail or the railroad tracks or a motor speedway. You know, there are just so many unknowns, and those aren't things that properties are going to be super forthcoming in telling you. So make sure you're doing your due diligence, and that is a really cool resource. I mean, we drive around the area and the neighborhood. You can see, you know, what it looks like, if it's run down, if it looks really nice, is it industrial? It really helps. And then the agency
grocery store.
Yep. Are you right around the corner from Aldi's or Costco? I mean, those are all important things to know. Yeah, Starbucks. That would be on my list, definitely. Definitely. And then again, as Jean said, if your agency has resources, use them. Use them. I cannot stress enough. It'll make it so much easier on you in the long run.
It is less stressful and more efficient to start
100%.
early and use resources than it is to wait and have the potential panic attack or stress moment.
100%.
So Jean and Ashley, I guess one of your pieces of advice is people should start early?
Yes! You're
Okay.
so smart, Steve. You caught
that. No, that is good sound advice. I would imagine, Ashley, that surprises in housing are usually not a good thing, right? When it comes to travel nurses and housing, surprises is usually not a good thing, right?
No, it is not. And in fact, it could completely derail or significantly negatively impact your overall experience. So that's not something you want to have to deal with.
Well, we have a plug for TNAA or a compliment for TNAA. Leah says, I like TNAA's housing assistance. So obviously somebody that's worked with you guys before and likes the housing assistance they get. So that's good news there. And yes, Jean, appreciate the plug for the Gypsy Nurse. We've got a great housing partner in Furnish Finder, which is probably very familiar to a lot of the people joining us. They are an organization that works with a variety of landlords to showcase their offerings through a very easy to use search tool. On our site too, one of the nice things about it is that when folks are looking for jobs on our job board, there's also housing options presented to them by virtue of Furnish Finder. So that's a nice additional feature of the Gypsy Nurse. But this has been great. I think there's been some really helpful information that's passed along. I know I learned something. I learned several things through this session today. Ashley and Jean, aside from getting started early, any passing or closing comments that you would like to provide to the audience when it comes to housing? Anything in particular, Ashley or Jean, regarding housing now? We're getting towards the end of the year or into the winter months, and people are looking at assignments for Q1. Any thoughts as we kind of close out this year and kind of look to next year?
I mean, pick warm if you can. I mean, that's no, I think the biggest things for me are making sure that you've got a reasonable budget. I always recommend a minimum and a maximum. Make sure that you have some points of flexibility and then just using the resources that are out there to help you successfully execute that. If you follow those 3 simple, very important rules. Oh, I'm sorry, 4, get started early. I'm sorry, I couldn't help it.
Get started early.
But if you're just thinking through those main components, you're going to have a good experience. You're going to have a smooth experience, and you're going to be able to easily execute your housing. And before you know it, you're going to be a pro. And you'll be giving other people advice.
There you go. All right. Well, Ashley and Jean, thank you so much for doing this session. Again, this is very, very helpful information for our community. One of the main topics that we are over and over in the network group is housing and questions related to that. So we really appreciate your time and your expertise today, and we look forward to doing more sessions with you guys going forward. So thank you for your participation. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, you're very welcome.
Stay
it was our
safe,
pleasure.
Everyone.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.